Hi, everybody. My name is Cecilia Whitehurst, and I am the Book Sandwich-In Committee co-chair. On behalf of the Book Sandwich-In Committee, I would like to welcome you to this review of Cocktails with George and Martha, sponsored by the Friends of the Tulsa County Libraries. Next week, we will hear about R.F. Kuang's Yellowface, which should also be another great talk. So I hope to see everybody again. I do want to share with you a few words about the Friends of the Library. Friends not only puts on BSI and Travels with Tulsa programs, we also sponsor the Adult Creative Writing Contest each year and assist with promoting Great Decisions, a foreign and domestic policy study group with multiple groups throughout the city. We also supply books to elementary students around town in conjunction with First Book. For many of these children, it's the first time they've ever had their own book. So if you are not already a friend, we have membership forms at the check-in table. You can become a member for as little as $10, and your dues will help us continue to provide these great programs and activities. Now I'd like to introduce our reviewer for today. Dale Watts was born in Pittsburgh, Kansas in 1944 and grew up on a farm before moving to Tulsa in 1956, where he had attended Tulsa Public Schools and graduated from McLean High School in 1962. He attended Northeastern State College and graduated in 1966 with a BA in English. He taught in Tulsa Public Schools at Hamilton Junior High, Central High School, and Booker T. Washington High School. Go Hornets. Retiring in 1997, he went to work for the Oklahoma Soccer Association as their publicity director, preparing their newsletter and website. In 1981, he attained his master's degree in English education from Northeastern. After teaching, he began playing keyboards in a number of bands and still plays today with his group Rendezvous. They perform classic rock for private parties. Dale married Mary Greenwell in 1967, and they have 4 children and 5 grandchildren, but sadly, Mary died of ovarian cancer in 2010. However, he loves attending his grandchildren's activities and watching them become adults. So now, here to tell you about Cocktails with George and Martha is Dale Watts.
Great. Aim this up at me a bit. Okay. You can hear me? All right. As a teacher, I'll try to not overwhelm you. Okay. I'm so glad to be able to share with you this book. As I said, with Edward Albee, I'll give you a little bit of introduction. When I was doing that master's degree work in 1981, the department chair at Northeastern invited both Edward Albee and Nabokov the poet to come to the school and spend a week and meet with students and so forth. And that evening, with all the master's degree students, we had dinner with Edward Albee, and I got to sit across the table from him for an hour and a half, pinching myself. Nice guy. But anyway, with all that to go, what we're going to look at is movies, marriage, and the making of Virginia Woolf, the movie. Okay? We'll see what we can do here. Let's see, I've got to do this one, I think. Help me out there. Which one of these buttons is supposed to be? Is it the right arrow, right? Yeah, I'm not getting much luck on that. I'll let you look at this. This has been my nightmare for the last week, okay?
It froze again.
Oh, okay. Okay, that'll good. That's good. And it's this arrow, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Okay, well, I just want to talk to her. Now that the book cover, of course, shows the 2 major characters in the film, and that's, of course, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And as I said, that in itself. So I'm going to present you with a semi-rhetorical question, which we'll get into later. Why do we cry at weddings? I just want you to think about that for a while, okay? Philip Gefter is the author of the book. He is well known for his writings on photography, and he's also a filmmaker. So he comes experienced with this. And most of the quotes that you're going to hear and see from my presentation are his, because he understands what was going on in the creation of this movie, which took a lot of turmoil. And of course, the movie itself generated lots of publicity and some anxiety with many people. But anyway, so Mr. Gefter, we're moving on. There are key characters in the book, and of course, Edward Albee, which I'll get to in just a moment, as the writer of the original script in the play. And then, of course, we also have Jack Warner, who was the head of Warner Brothers. Yeah, and there are going to be all kinds of turmoil among all these characters before this movie gets made, because they were all had their own interest at heart. You also have Ernest Lehman, who was the producer and the writer of the script. Mike Nichols, who would direct the movie. Richard Burton, of course, Elizabeth Taylor, and of course the two younger stars, George Segal and Sandy Dennis. All right. So here we go. I want to share with you a short 30-minute clip, 3-minute clip from the movie itself, was 2.5 hours. The short clip, just to kind of get an idea about George and Martha, if it's been a long time. By the way, how many of you saw this movie? All right, okay, good. So this will bring back some memories, okay?
We've got guests coming over.
When?
Now.
Lord, Martha, do you know what time it is?
Poor Georgie, Porgy. Put it on party.
Wasn't a very nice thing to say, Martha.
Wasn't what? George?
Yes, love? Really looking forward to this, Martha. Martha's a different with language, she really is. Martha, rubbing alcohol for you?
Sure.
Martha, will you show where we keep the euphemism?
Honestly, George, you burn me up.
All right.
You really do, George.
Okay, Martha,
you really do.
Just don't shoot your mouth off about you know what. Martha!
George!
Okay, Martha, okay. Martha is changing, and Martha is not changing for me. Martha hasn't changed for me in years. If Martha is changing, it means we're going to be here for days. Why, Martha, your Sunday chapel dress.
Oh, that's the most attractive. George is bogged down in the history department. You hear that, George?
Yes, Martha. Martha, decency forbid.
Shut up. Hey, George. George, tell them about it.
You tell them, Martha, you're good at it. Martha, in my mind, you were buried in cement right up to the neck. Did you really think I was going to kill you, Martha? You're obsessed by that phrase, Martha. It's ugly. Martha, when's our son coming home?
That was a very pretty speech, George.
Thank you, Martha.
You rose to the occasion good.
He has blue eyes, Martha.
Green.
Blue, Martha.
George has watery blue eyes, kind of milky blue.
Make up your mind, Martha.
I actually fell for him. That, there.
Martha's a romantic at heart.
You clean up the mess you made in here, George?
No, Martha, I did not clean up the mess I made. But you've taken a new tack, Martha, in the last century or two, which is just too much. Too much.
You've got at me. You don't have to do anything, George.
Oh, come off it, Martha.
Is that a threat, George, huh?
That's a threat, Martha. Martha, I run these flowers because you's Martha, gee.
Truth or illusion, George, doesn't it matter to you at all?
Sit down, Martha. This is a civilized game.
Just get on with it, George.
Yes, Martha. Well, Martha, I'm afraid
Look.
our boy isn't coming home for his birthday.
Okay, you get a little sense of what is going on, of course, between these two continually, all right? And that's why the book is mainly about marriage, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit today, so we'll stay with it. Albee himself was born in 1928. He never knew his real parents because he was adopted within 2 weeks. Okay? Keep this in mind as we start looking at the play and all that's going on. He has no idea who my parents were, he said. Reed Albee, the father who adopted him, was heir to an empire of vaudeville theaters. And Ed Wynn and Groucho Marx would often come to the house for dinner in their mansion, and it was a mansion. Frankie Albee, the mother, was a grande dame with a commanding presence and would often remind him he was adopted, with the understanding that if he did not behave or measure up, I could be returned to the orphanage. So, yeah, such a wonderful woman. Albie was thrown out of many of the boarding schools and often refused to do any kind of homework whatsoever. And, you know, you can understand, upon enrolling at Choate Rosemary Hall, which is a very exclusive school, the headmaster, bless his heart, responded to the Albies about Edwards when he said he's an adopted child, and confidentially, he dislikes his mother with a cordial and eloquent dislike, which I consider entirely justified. She is, in my opinion, a selfish, dominating person, whereas Ed is a sensitive, perceptive, and intelligent boy who has been fully the victim of an unsympathetic home and the psychological effect of feeling he is not wanted. Imagine growing up like that. At 19, Reed told him he needs to straighten up or get out. So Edward left, went to New York, Greenwich Village. In an attempt to get out of the draft, you remember, the draft was still around in those days, Edward signed up for the Army Reserve. But the interviewer asked Albie if he were homosexual, and Ed refused to lie, and so he was not accepted into the Army Reserve. Frankie often denounced homosexuality, and they often argued bitterly over this. She once took a crystal ashtray and threw it at him. In 1958, he wrote his first play, which is called The Zoo Story, at the suggestion of, you ready for this, Thornton Wilder, who has Our Town back on Broadway right now, if you're aware. The next play he wrote was The Zoo Story, which at the suggestion of Thornton Wilder. His next play after that was The American Dream, which portrays a couple who once adopted a son, sound familiar, whom they crippled with psychological torture of a classic Freudian kind. Characters in the play were named Mommy, Daddy, and Grandma. Are we getting psychologically warped enough at this point? Okay. Frankie came from very humble beginnings, okay? She was a shop girl in New Jersey, and Edward commented on her in a comment to journalist Edward Costner in 1961. People try so hard to escape being touched by the unpleasantness that they need, that they wind up being unable to feel anything of communicate anything. And once again, that's all Mom. Edward's comment about American culture was and still is prophetic. The health of a nation, a society, can be determined by the art it demands. We have insisted of television and our movies that they not have anything to do with anything. That they may be Never Never Land. And if we demand this same function of our live theater, what will be left of the visual auditory arts? Okay. Albie won 3 Pulitzer Prizes for his plays. 1967, Delicate Balance, 1975, Seascape, and in 1994, 3 Tall Women. He won the Tony Award for Lifetime Literature Achievement in 2006. In 1996, he was one of the recipients of the Kennedy Center honors and was awarded the National Medal of Arts. So, well-respected young man. In 1962, he completed the draft of his stage play of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Revision was necessary to remove language that was not acceptable in 1962. Edward was agreeable because he wished to challenge the conventions, of the times. One was to slyly tweak America's nose about its prudish attitude. And that's the reason he named his 2 lead characters, George and Martha, for George Washington and Martha Washington. God forbid. Okay. In the opening of the play, we are given the first clue to Martha's disappointment in her life and for women in general. And we'll get back to that point. When she utters, "What a dump!" uttered by Bette Davis from the movie Beyond the Forest. She gets really upset that George cannot remember the name of the movie. And she walks up to him with her hands on her hips and states defiantly, she's discontent, as definitely Martha is as well. Now then, so this begins the behavior, as you've just witnessed a bit of, that intermittently tender, witty, drunkenly vengeful, increasingly monstrous, and bitterly sadistic. And once again, if you can imagine in 1966 when this movie came out, as I've been talking to some of you who went to see it, you're going, what in the world, you know? As I said, when my wife and I walked out of the Delman Theater at 15th and Lewis in 1966, after having seen it, we were both speechless. We're thinking about getting married in a year. Is that what it's going to turn into? Oh my. Virginia Woolf was and remains an existential provocation and the fundamental truth about marital attachment behind the rituals of everyday life. I love that quote by Gefter. Let's take a look at some of the examples we were given in TV. I Love Lucy, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver, Burns and Allen, and of course, the Camelot couple. And guess what we now know, right? Because, yeah, that wasn't reality. Remember this comment about illusion? This is what Albie's getting at. We were living in an illusion, thinking this is what marriage was going to be. And it's nothing like that, folks. You don't have a honeymoon for 52 years. It doesn't work like that. So, opening night. John Steinbeck attended the opening night of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in New York, and he commented about the play. The flash of the moment is binding. He talks about Walt Whitman sent his home printed copies of Leaves of Grass to the so-called newspaper giants of his time, only to have Emerson deign to reply. He was the only one to reply. And Emerson said, I salute you on the threshold of a great career. Steinbeck's comment on the play, isn't it interesting that only the vulgar newspapers, that's what he's talking about, found your play vulgar? But that was inevitable. I guess I want to see it again and again. The play exposed the chasm in the cultural life of America in 1966, and of course, even as a stage play. Remember, stop and think about this. There were only 3 national television networks, right? ABC, CBS, NBC. That was it. And you had 3 white men giving you the news every night. There were 2 major news weeklies. Can you think of them? Time, Newsweek. That was it. And a handful of feature magazines. Can you think of one? Life, Look, and Post, Saturday Evening. Yeah, Saturday Evening Post. One public conversation calibrated to a narrow frequency of white middle-class babbitry. Wow. I mean, we just took that, right? And accepted it. Also, the historical conditions of this time, the assassination of Kennedy, the Cold War threats and the Cuban Missile Crisis, the suicide even of Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. The media set a steady anodyne pitch of everything will be fine, which was an illusion of its own. Stop and think, right? Everything's going to be okay. We're fine. While we're on this, let's talk about things that women could not do before 1970, right? We think about it. I'll bet you'll remember some of these. For example, you could not have a credit card in your name, right? My wife applied for one, and on the card it read Mrs. Dale Watts. Didn't even have her name on. You could not lease property. You couldn't attend a military academy. You could not be an astronaut. You could not serve on juries. That might have been a blessing, but what the heck? You could not receive paid maternity leave. You could not serve as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You could not adopt a baby as a single person. And for all of those of you who waited in high school and junior high at the bus stop, you couldn't wear pants to school, okay? Right? Remember? Teachers, We couldn't, yeah, you couldn't wear them either, right? Teresa, am I correct? Yes. So let's talk about marriage, which is the main one of the themes in this book, of course, in the 20th century. Love-based marriage in the past had not been the norm. Really, remember, rather marriage had been meant to serve the structure of society, increase the labor force, improve a family's social or financial position, facilitate a parent's political gain, secure property for generations to come, or fulfill religious obligations. I hope that's not ringing too many bells for all of you, but you know. The play offers a kind of under the microscope exam of marriage itself, for better or worse, richer or poorer, sickness and in health, till death do us part. Albee is challenging the audience to recognize that marriage has an emotional foundation where the matter and the marrow lie, and from which the messy psychological complexities of both individuals intertwine like a helix and manifest in their domestic routines and public presentations. I'm sure that you know as well as I do, many people who put on pretensions in public of their wonderful, sweet life, and at home, it's utter warfare. Okay? So let's get back to making the movie. And they had plenty of arguments. They really did. First of all, they had to deal with casting. And they cast and wound up with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Was that a plus or a minus? As Albee sat across from me that night at that meeting, he said he didn't want them. They were too big of stars. He felt it would affect the play. But guess what? He was wrong because it was the best thing that happened. They hired a director who had never directed a movie. Mike Nichols had directed many stage plays. He'd never directed a movie. They hired a producer, Ernest Lehman, who had never produced a movie. He had written scripts, as you can see, for Sabrina, North by Northwest, West Side Story, and that, that little musical called Sound of Story, Sound of Music. So here you got this whole group, and they're going to be arguing with each other all the time about what they want to do. And the imaginary child issue, because as you kind of caught that reference in there, in the play, there's an imaginary issue that George and Martha did not have a child. She creates an imaginary child to further that. Lehman wanted the child to be real and part of the film. Nichols said, no, it needs to be imaginary. It needs to be part of the illusion that these two are suffering. So, part two, Jack Warner was adamant that this film be filmed in color. Stop and think about that. Now, here's the reason. It's 1965, and the color television is just kind of starting to show up out there. If you wanted a real color movie, you went to the movies. And they knew that they were losing audiences to television, right? So he thought, no, we can't do this in black and white. It's not going to work. Burton and Taylor wanted Mike Nichols to be the director. Lehman and Nichols wanted the film shot in black and white because, as Albee said, this is a dark comedy. This is not happy-go-lucky, we're all having a great time. And makeup in those days in color would not hide the fact that Elizabeth was 32 years old, and she was going to have to portray a woman of 52, okay? The black and white makeup worked, as you could tell. It didn't seem to bother. And it also covered up, they couldn't cover up Burton's acne-scarred face. Lehman would also add to the arguments by insisting that the movie's scenes shot outside be moved to Massachusetts in Smith College, which meant transporting the entire cast, crew, everything to Massachusetts from California. So added money. Money is always in the background of movie making. The music composer, Lehman, wanted Alex North. And of course, Nichols wanted Andre Previn. Alex North wound up as the music director. Part three, arguments. Elizabeth Taylor. Oh, we all know, right? You can rattle off probably all the movies that she was in. She portrays a 52-year-old maiden at the age of 32. Can she pull that off? I will be honest with you. Most of them were concerned because Elizabeth was a star. but was she an actress? She became an actress in this movie, thanks to her hubby, or her to-be hubby, whatever, Richard Burton. He would grill her on presenting those lines properly. And so suddenly she was not just a pretty face that would stand properly in front of the camera and recite a few lines. She became important. So would they accept her after Cleopatra? And especially seeing how she was just involved in that messy divorce with Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds. Oh my gosh, Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher. I remember how many people were so upset at that. And what about her current situation with Richard Burton? I mean, and was Burton too masculine for the part? Because he'd had some pretty heavy-duty roles. And he was also, of course, a theatrical. I mean, he could do Shakespeare, right? So was he too theatrical? And his affair with Taylor, is this all going to affect the film? And so they were arguing about this until almost to the end. But Mike Nichols makes the best point. Fate provided the most remarkable gift for me as a first-time director. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, who were perfectly matched to each other in the terms of charisma and whose real-life marriage echoed that of George and Martha. And if you remember those, oh my Lord. Let's talk about the Hays Code. Anybody know about the Hays Code? Do you remember the Hays Code? What was it noted for? What was one of the things about it that you could? Yes, sir.
Like you had to, even if in a married couple, there used to be the rule you had to have separate beds side by side, but not.
That's right. You didn't have couples sleeping in the same bed until after this movie came out, and it changed the Hays Code. Okay, and so the National Legion of Decency. Boy, do you remember the Legion of Decency? I married a Catholic girl, so when we were dating, we had to check the list. Could we go see this movie? Right? And of course, after a while, we paid attention. We went to see the movie anyway, but I mean, it was there. Warner wanted the language in the film to pass also the Legion of Decency with an A4 rating, which would list it as morally unobjectionable for adults with reservations. However, I love this by Nichols. Nichols, as the director, refused to shoot what we call protection shots or looping of the words. And you've probably seen this in some movies where you see the mouth move, but the word that comes out is not because they've edited out the curse word, okay? And if you're watching the midnight or the late night TV comics on shows, you'll see them, they just blur it out, you know. And we all know what they said, that's okay. Youth and celebrity. One of the things that was happening in the mid-60s was a change. Elizabeth Taylor, you know, she was gorgeous, but she was also 32. And Liz's lush, glossy beauty and her increasingly voluptuous figure made her unsuited to play the newly emerging American star. This is Sam Kashner and Nancy Schoenberger. The new crop of younger actresses, these will remember you, Julie Christie, Vanessa Redgrave, Jane Fonda. They were ushered in by Liz, but of course, she had 5 marriages, 4 children, 31 films, and world infamy behind her just had too much history for her to play a new woman. So Nichols and Lehman would fight over the script of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. What did I do? There, I punched something. I can go on. They're going to be concerned because they had to cut a 3-hour play down to under 2 hours. What did I touch? Touch something. Okay, thank you. I don't know what I'm doing up here. He had to cut an hour of dialogue out, and he had to keep in the play the 2-hour standard range. So he added 2 scenes, which helped him pull this into 2 hours. The one scene that you saw outside, and also a roadhouse scene where there's all kinds of other silliness going on. Nichols' job was not to fix the script, but to reveal what Albee wrote. And he did a marvelous job because it was tough. He also understood that the play is about a marriage. And this is the important part. It's also about marriage. And you stop and you look back at what's going on, you understand, yeah, we hadn't really looked at marriage very well. It's a structural foundation of nearly every society on earth. He was intent on seeing past the spectacle of George and Martha's drunken behavior to uncover the truths that resonate through every marriage, including his own. Layman, okay. Layman had to cut almost an hour of dialogue to keep it in 2 hours. And as I said, I'm sorry, John. Nichols filmed the scenes. This is interesting. I don't know how many of you know about filming, but films are not made in sequence. They don't shoot it as it happens. They shoot sections. For example, they may film a whole scene where there's, fighting and all kinds of nonsense going on, and then the actors the next day show up and they shoot a love scene. Wait a minute, right? Nichols said, no, we're going to film this as if it were a play. So he shoots each scene in sequence, which makes the whole play easier for the actors, needless to say. So this made the film more like a play than separate scenes, which would then have to be edited in. It struck a chord in 1966. Stop and think back if you are that age. The Cuban Missile Crisis, threat of atomic bombs, or if you were a student like I was, hovering under your desk thinking that's going to protect you. The assassination of Kennedy, right? The civil rights movement. It's all starting to happen. And here's a good line for you from Gefter. 1966, adults who had grown up during the Depression and World War II no longer were swayed by myths of love, romance, and sex they had grown up with. We realized, I don't think that's the way it works. Most people were sick of pretending that the cartoon versions of marriage seen by movies such as The Parent Trap and Pillow Talk, and by TV shows such as I Love Lucy and Father Knows Best, I love this line, they were looking for answers about the meaning of things without quite knowing the question. In 1932, another little interesting fact Mr. Gefter gives us, there were only 3 marriage counseling services or centers in the entire United States. By 1968, there were 1,800 licensed marriage counselors in California. We had a problem and we didn't even know about it, didn't we? Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf provided, among other things, a brutally honest portrayal of marriage and a welcome, if bracing, surprise of relief. Their behavior provides a cushion of distance for any couple in the audience to view the marital discord on screen in the abstract and yet measure their own marriages against it. At the same time, there's enough verity in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf to glean that it is not just about one marriage, it's about marriage. It won 5 Oscars in 1967. It was nominated for 13. Of course, actress Elizabeth Taylor, Sandy Dennis won Best Supporting, Best Costume Design, black and white, Best Cinematography, black and white, Best Art Direction, Interior Decorative, black and white, and then all these, of course. So it was a hit, right? And Jack Warner was very, very happy because it made him millions, okay? I put this up here for you ladies. How many of you are familiar with Virginia Woolf's A Room of Her Own? Okay, I love this quote too. Women have served all these centuries as looking glasses, possessing the magic and the delicious power of reflecting the figure of a man at twice its natural state. She was, of course, a marvelous person and writer, and I taught her works at Booker T. Oh, well. So, just by the way, some of the films before that dealt with marriage, you may have seen some of these or watched them on replays. Women, 1939, Infidelity as a Sin which necessitated divorce. Right? That was the way it worked. Adam's Rib, Katharine Hepburn, oh my gracious, right? The dialogue and the witty exchange, it started there. They were playing with that in married lawyers. One was the prosecutor, one was the defendant. So it was like, it was a great, if you ever watch it, it's wonderful. Man in a gray flannel suit. I never saw this, but I understand. World War II vet comes home with PTSD, and his wife is very successful. Does that not work well? Okay. And Lion in Winter, Katharine Hepburn, Peter O'Toole. Oh, here we go. Once again, King Henry wants to put his son, John, on the throne. And of course, Richard is wanted by Eleanor. And all the lines in that movie, oh my gosh, Hepburn and those guys, it's going like this. And you're just laughing, right? I'll never forget one of her lines when they talking about something with the bedroom scene, and Catherine says, well, you know, our family, it has its ups and downs. And then if you remember 2022, everything and everywhere all at once, right? How many of you saw that? Okay. It was a strange movie, right? But look what she's doing. She's an immigrant being audited by the IRS. She must save the universe by connecting with parallel universes, versions of herself. I remember I watched it. I was going, I think I understand that. I'm not sure. So I want you to notice, I'm going to get back to my question. Look at the couples that you know and or observe, not necessarily now, but at times, even in high school, you know, how did they end up together? And what are the odds of them staying the course of a lifetime? I look at my friends, oh my God, they're going to get married. Perhaps they were lucky enough to be drawn together by love, the aura, the euphoria, the suspension of disbelief in seeing one's dreams come true in another individual. Then the intoxicating levitation that comes with being recognized equally by that dream come true person and who wants you in the same way. Nice stuff. At the end of the play, the movie, George and Martha in bed, and very much they were showing their love of each other. And George asks Martha, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Now, just going back a bit, Albee found that quote on a bathroom mirror in one of the bars, you know, in Greenwich Village. Okay. And he thought, I got to use that. And he did. Okay. Now, stop and think about Virginia Woolf, which is actually a change on who's afraid of the big bad wolf, right? So Little Red Riding Hood goes to visit Grandma. And what's there? A wolf in clothing, an illusion, right? So you see where he started working with it. This is all talking about how, you know, my grandma, what great big teeth you have, right? All that stuff. I am, George, she says. I am. After all is said and done, they have seen the raw truth about each other and they're willing to move forward together. Scared, but willing, but scared. And marriage is not an easy condition to maintain. And I'm sure I could probably get some silent nods if you were married and have been for a number of years. It starts out as a fairy tale and ends up a labyrinth of emotional, psychological, circumstantial, and ethical challenges. It takes work. It takes love. But is it worth it? Well, if you ask George and Martha, representative of so many couples, for better or worse, sickness and health, they would probably say it depends on the day. Okay. So why do we cry at weddings? Anybody have any insight? Thank you. Thank you so much. I really knew that you guys would appreciate that. Any comments on why you cry at weddings? Anybody? We know sometimes it's for happiness, but in some cases, I can remember attending weddings going, oh, this is never going to work. All right. Any other questions? Yes. It has some, but as I said, I watched my senior year at McLean. I was sitting at the desk in the English classroom because we ran out of desks with two 18-year-old girls who were planning their marriage that June. I'm not, really? And I hate to tell you that neither one lasted. Okay, neither one lasted. But you know, yes.
I don't know much about the history of Burton and Taylor, but did their marriage break up soon after?
I can't remember. I mean, I should have looked that up and I did not. Anybody know? Did they last? Yeah, they got married and divorced twice. Yeah, which is not uncommon with her. She would do that sort of thing. I'm sorry, I don't really have that answer. Really don't. Anything else people have? Okay. Oh, back here. Okay. She wasn't getting enough diamonds for her. All right. Well, I thank you so much for letting me do this. I loved it. Thank you.